Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another Yogi Misfit Sessions. My name is Danni Pomplun, and I am your host. Welcome to session 79, and it is already the middle of June. If you're listening to this episode when it airs, it's June 12th, which means that we're halfway through 2019, and that to me is a mind-boggling. I feel like I have no idea what has happened to the year this year, but whatever. Anyway, here I am in the middle of June. Super excited to be coming at you guys with this episode today. It's really, really powerful. It's one of our Fierce Calm collaborations. If you guys haven't heard of Fierce Calm yet, they're a great organization based out of the UK. Dr. Lee Watson started it, and he basically just started this little Instagram account and had people share their stories of how yoga has saved them in one way, shape, or form. And it just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing, which I think is absolutely beautiful because it gives people the time and the space to, normalize conversations that wouldn't necessarily be normal or people would want to talk about. So I'm really excited about today's episode. I'm also excited because it's summer. Yeah, so it's officially, I'm in San Francisco, if you guys don't know. So we don't really have much of a summer, but over the last few days, it's been pretty nice. There was like a couple windy days in between, but we actually have like some nice, some nice summery warm days out there. And it also means that festival season is coming up. So I'll be bopping around at a couple festivals. I have a few things that are happening here in San Francisco over the summer. I've got a core workshop happening on June 15th. And then I've got another workshop happening on July 6th with Jacob Manning, who's an awesome yoga teacher based out of Orange County. And we're doing an arm balancing workshop together. And then it's festival season. I've been working on a lot of core work in general in my own practice. And I've always been geeking out on arm balances. It's super fun and a really good time for me to play on my hands. It gives me like this sense of liberation anyway. Speaking of arm balancing, I have been working on this 5-part video series. It's like an online course basically, but you get 5 videos. We do Bakasana, which is crow pose. We do Parshva Bakasana, which is side crow. And then we do a couple of the other arm balances that I love so much. And there's a 10-minute warm-up video and there's a 10-minute cool-down video. And I am just giving this whole thing away to my community and to my tribe. So that's all of you podcasters listening in. It's going to be releasing out at the end of June. We're just finished pushing the last sparkly touches on it. And it's a free 5-week course. You get to keep these videos forever. And you can sign up by going to www.dannipomplun.com, and the slash is going to be email. So www.dannipomplun.com/email, and then you enter in your information, and then boom, you get a little welcome email that keeps you in touch with all podcasting things. And then as soon as the program starts coming up in a few weeks, you get that 5-week program to practice at home whenever you want. Again, it's fully accessible to you whenever you need it, and it's 100% free. It's my little gift to say thank you to the community. I haven't done one of these little giveaways in quite a while, and so I feel really good about it. So if you're gonna sign up for the free video course, sign up. www.dannipomplun.com/email. So outside of the arm balancing and the summary things, it's festival season, y'all, which means that it's party time. Festivals are always a really good time. I personally have a really good time because it's like social out. I never get to hang out with a bunch of other yoga teachers. It's like we're all teaching at the same time, or someone's traveling, or someone's doing whatever, or someone has a workshop at the same time. So it's like the one time out of the year where I get to hang out with my colleagues, and I also get to connect with a bunch of other community members from around the nation and people that come around the world. So I'll be hanging out at the Wanderlust Squall Festival, which is the weekend of July 19th. And then I'll be hanging out at the Astral Yoga Festival, which is the last weekend in July, which is also my birthday weekend. So if I see you there, come give me a high five. And then I'll be hanging out at the Barefoot Yoga Festival, which is happening in August. And you can find all this stuff and information on it in my schedule page on my website. But I'm super pumped. I'm going to be doing some chanting, tossing out my favorite class, which is Beats and Bhakti. It's me chanting a lot and then doing a really fun flow. And then we're doing it all to a deep house set that was specially mixed for it. So it's a super, super, super good time. So I hope you guys enjoy all the giveaways. And I wanted to remind everybody too, if you guys have any requests or things that you could use or stuff that's actually going to benefit and serve you, like there's nothing more that I cannot stand when people just try to give you stuff that you just don't want or don't need. So I mean, this wouldn't be possible without you guys. So let me know what you want. You can always send in an email or leave comments in the show. That's always really good. And I'll make sure that I leave all these links in the show notes as well. So you can click on the little link and know where to get the free things at. So back to episode 79. I am so honored and so excited to have Melanie and Jennifer on the show. And this is another the Fierce Calm collabs, and it's like, again, I just love sharing these stories because, again, it normalizes these conversations that can be pretty scary to have. They can be almost shameful, and so I think that the more that we spread this message and connect with each other about it, the better it gets for all of us, right? The better we all get to actually be in this yogic state. So yeah. I'd love to thank our friends, of course, over at SF Yoga Magazine. They are super cool. They're super awesome. And they give us so much love and support. It's just really great to have them on our side. And the last part is, you know it's coming. iTunes reviews really do help. So you have to hear me every week say this. And there's a reason why I say it. Is because the show grows when you leave an iTunes review. So if you can, please leave an iTunes review. It takes maybe 2 minutes, and there's a little link down below with a how-to section. So it's even like spoon-fed to you. My goal by the end of the year is to get to like 500 reviews. I'm only at 68. So that means I need you to help me out with this one, please. Double time for your boy, okay? So I can keep this podcast going. Leave a review down in iTunes. It really does help. If I see you in person, I will give you a big hug and a high five. If I don't see you in person, you can just shout me out on Instagram and I'll make sure I give you some love. But it really does help out the show so much. It spreads the word. It allows us to be moved up so that people can see it. And yeah, it helps everyone do it. Remember that podcasters are out here solo. So anyway, without further ado, hope y'all enjoy session number 79, the Fierce Calm collab. Now, Jennifer and Melanie, I have to tell you, this is the first time I've had multiple guests on the show.
Well, we're excited to sort of, to break the bank there.
Y'all are trendsetters.
Thank you. That is a huge compliment.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool because it's nice to get more than one. I mean, listen, I get to do this thing all the time, and I get to talk to people and hear one person's perspective, but to get two people's perspectives and to hear more stories at the same time, let's bring it on.
We're ready to bring it.
So this is one of my favorite. I love doing the shows when I get to collaborate with Fierce Calm, just because I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I love the Fierce Calm platform. I love what they do. I love that, I've got shame in my story, and of course all the things, and yoga helped me get to where I'm at today. But to normalize these conversations and to have these conversations out loud is such a gift. This actually, I'll share this. This past Friday, I was at Love Story Yoga, which is a studio here in San Francisco. And, my story has been published before in magazines and in print, and I've never actually spoken out loud about my story in front of a group of people. I've done recordings of it. And there was 120 humans. And I was But, it all came out. And afterwards, I felt so, raw and vulnerable. And I was supposed to go to dinner with friends afterwards. And I was like, I think I need to go home and just sit.
Right.
But, it was very cool because it's so cathartic. And also, there were a lot of people that were like, thank you. I would have never I would have never have thought this, or I've never would have, like I've something similar happened, or, whatever it is. So I just long-winded answer of saying, I really love doing this part of the show.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I know this is Melanie, and I can speak for myself, which is, I think the personal narrative is one of the most powerful ways to create change, because we can actually engage people's hearts, not just their minds. And, here I will say, for both Jennifer and I, writing not only our stories, but creating space and room for other people to share their stories has been one of the most impactful ways that we found to, allow folks to feel affirmed, to be seen, to be witnessed, as well as at the same time being exposed to stories really unlike their own. So for me, that is really the revolutionary thing, is, having the space and the ability to be witnessed in their truth, and allowing all pieces of that truth to be absolutely okay, exactly the way it is.
I agree. I think being witnessed and seen is it's something that we don't get enough of these days, and also because we're so connected that we kind of just forget even just seeing people in the day-to-day life, not to mention, going even deeper and really truly seeing who someone is. We're so connected. We're almost disconnected. We forget about the human side.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I would love to hear, I guess I want to start by just, I want to hear your stories of how yoga came in and saved your life, both of y'all, and now what you're up to. There's so much you're up to. Like, we can go this could be a 5 episode series.
Yes, I would agree.
So, who wants to start? Jennifer, Melanie, anybody, who wants to start?
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in.
Okay.
Yeah. So I found yoga when I was in grad school, way back when. This was a time when it was becoming cool to do yoga, to try yoga, and literally that's how I did it. I remember doing videos in my apartment during grad school, engaging with this practice called yoga. For me, why I chose to try yoga was because I needed to find a form of activity that was not related to my story of an eating disorder. So during college, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, and a part of how the eating disorder manifested for me was an exercise addiction. And I had been an athlete all of my life, played basketball, softball, soccer, any sport. I just absolutely loved playing sports. And when I was in college, I was on the crew team and fell in love with crew. It was by far the hardest sport I'd ever played, but one of the most rewarding, just because it was such a team sport. And my second year on the team, we got a new coach. And I'll never forget this. It was it's so visceral when I recall this memory, but we were in the boat, we were practicing, and he said to us, I can tell how hard you work by how your body changes. And I took those words in so deeply, because I was a perfectionist, a people pleaser. I was always the best on my team, straight A student. And now I was being challenged to prove my work ethic through my body. And this was brand new for me. And the only way that I could make sense of that was to shrink, to get smaller. How else could someone recognize that I was working hard? And certainly, if we put that in context with social messages about, which bodies fit and which bodies don't, of course, my leaning would be to get smaller, right? Because they're the messages that we're fed all the time. So, I was on a mission now to prove my work ethic through my body. And that spiraled really quickly and fiercely into a full-blown eating disorder. And, I'm not blaming the coach. It's really the way I took in his words and internalized them, and then kind of acted on them. And certainly when I think back on, the full story of my life and different things that happened in my life way before going to college, and also just some of those personality traits that I named, I definitely had all the ingredients for an eating disorder. So I think that event was just kind of what kicked it into gear. So coming back to your original question, at this point in graduate school, I was really missing this part of myself who loved to be active. And I needed to find a way to do that that was safe and would not jeopardize my recovery. And that's when I turned to yoga to kind of get some activity back in my life. And what ended up happening was I landed in a really wonderful community. I wasn't long after that I started to study to be a teacher, taught for many, many, many years before, real life of getting married and having kids and a full-time job and all of that. And actually, once real life kicked in, and I'm saying real in quotes, of course.
Yeah. versus the fake life.
The quotes, but I'm doing I'm sitting here real in quotes. Once real life kicked in, and my yoga practice fell away, and I found myself in a really, really severe relapse, actually, of eating disorder. And it was in that time that I really, really knew that I needed my practice back in my life, and I needed to kind of take that to a next level by really making it the lens through which I view my life and live my life. And that has really set me on my path to doing the work that I do today as a yoga therapist.
I love, a couple things to stand out when you say, when your coach told you those things and how you took it in. I think a lot of us, forget, we can be in recovery in many different ways, and we can be in abuse with any type of relationship with anything, whether it's a person or a substance or a food or whatever it is. But when we're younger, at times we don't have, there's no toolbook to life. There's no hey, this is how you deal with this when someone says this, or this is how you react when, this is how you take someone's anger and you lay it off of you and not internalize it. Yeah. And so when we're young and even as adults, and we're still trying to figure things out and get really grounded in our own ways, we don't have the tools and techniques to deal with that stuff. So we do the best that we can. And then it ends up turning into something, it can go one of two ways or one of a million different ways. And sometimes it has a deeper hit on us. Melanie, I want to hear your story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in many ways it's similar to Jennifer's. And yet it becomes a little more general. I almost feel like mine was sort of the general story of growing up a girl in this culture where it was really about, the messages coming from the media, from family about being small, being, knowing one's place, not taking up too much space, not wanting too much, not being too much. And at the same time, not really having, our appetite to drive us. There was a really big rhetoric around mind over matter and being able to have willpower and control. And for me, I always felt like my body was out of control. My desire was out of control. My appetite was out of control. I just could not get that sort of mind over matter denial thing down where, my grandmother had it down pat. And so there were definitely a lot of associations around worth that came through that, and value, as well as feeling just generally that I was out of control and that I could not trust myself. And that manifested in so many different ways, from being in relationships that were really super toxic, tolerating really horrible things in my life, to really doubting that I could self-actualize in any meaningful way. I really just did not see the possibility of becoming a full person. I felt like I had to be someone's attachment or adornment. And so when I came to yoga, for me, it was kind of dealing with all of the, I would say low grade depression that came from existing in that way, to coming to terms with my body, to learning and practicing what forgiveness feels like, right? What acceptance feels like, what it looks like to actually be in union and harmony with one's body, as opposed to having the intellect or, the desire fight the body. And so there was just a real sense of peace and a homecoming that happened through my yoga practice, which was, happened about 2 years after I came to sociology and women's studies and, feminist practice, and had kind of gotten the intellectual liberation down pat. And then the practice was really about how it plugged into my body, how I could live that way, how I could feel that way, how I could exist that way. And that was really the very clear moment for me where I was going to combine those two elements of having a really critical consciousness, raising consciousness both intellectually, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally, and, finding a way to present that to folks so that they could find their own unique form of liberation. And that really was the beginning of all the work that I've done since, from writing to co-founding the Yoga and Body Image Coalition, to being a professor, to being a coach. That is the hub of all my work, or is the ways that those two things came together, the sort of intellectual awareness and liberation, and then the physical and emotional liberation. And that all came, through my yoga practice. That was the glue for all of it.
What part of the practice do you think, actually, I'd love this question for both of y'all. Melanie, just because I'm with you right now, what part of the practice do you think was, I feel like there are a lot of tools that we teach, like asana, pranayama, blah, 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 that get you to a yogic state. What part of, or what tools did you find where you're like, if you were to give someone some advice or some simple like life hacks as to like what happens when you start to get derailed, what things do you do to check back and to make sure that your train is back on the track?
Well, I'll tell you that that's looked different at different points in my life. I started my practice in my early 20s, and I am now in my mid 40s. So, I've been 10 different people since then, right?
Yeah.
And my practice has taken on many different forms. And I won't lie and pretend that it was only the meditative aspect. It very much was the physical as blended with the mental. So, Jennifer was talking about, she'd done all of these sports, was very physically active. I also had a tendency at that point to do a lot of sort of what they call exercise bulimia. Like that was something I could get on with. And there was also the part that I liked the adrenaline rush, right? And so when I came into a very physical yoga class early in my life, there was the experience of the physicality. There was the movement was very appealing. It appealed to that sense of, that should be active. And yet at the same time, the way that the movement happened was flowing and graceful. The rhetoric that went with the movement from my own teacher was the antithesis to everything that I had absorbed in fitness and diet culture about, no pain, no gain, and keep pushing yourself. Here, it was actually about compassion. It was about moderation. It was about not comparing or competing. So it was this really wonderful blend that allowed me to experience the actual physical nature of my body in a very new way, which opened it up to listening and to then responding to that. Whereas now, it looks very different. My yoga practice and my mindfulness practice is ongoing all throughout the day, right? It's from simply taking the pause to taking the breath, and things of that nature. So it's become, I think, simplified and fine-tuned in many ways. But I'm not going to pretend that the physical part was not a wonderful gateway for me. So in terms of advice, I always think it's important for people to really find what truly and authentically calls to them and speaks to them, and not to make it more complicated than it needs to be. Maybe just taking the practice of taking the breath, taking the pause, that can be a wonderful way to start to engage that curiosity about who they are and what they feel and what they need.
What are your current, like when you're in your practice currently right now, what does it look like? Like what 3 things are you currently doing a lot of? Is it more physical? Is it more meditation? Is it more, study? What does it look like for you currently?
Oh my God, I am steeped in this all the time, just in a very different way. At this point, the 3 top things that I can say is I do walking meditation. So I walk at least an hour a day, sometimes in one section, other times apart. And it is about the movement. It is about the flow. I'm oftentimes doing, affirmations, visualizations. I'm bringing in the meditative state there. I'm doing tons of self-study all the time with my own mentors and coaches in terms of how can we deepen these sort of tools when we get agitated or frustrated or scared. So again, using sensation, just the awareness of sensation as a point to realign. And then I do a meditation practice, and I have mantra practices. So I throw them all in there all the time. Like it is an ongoing thing. Very, very, like I said, deeply immersed, because I'm holding space for a lot of people all of the time. So it's an absolutely crucial element to my work, is to be constantly going deeper in my own practices.
Absolutely. I love that. Jennifer, I want to hear more about like, same thing. It's similar to what Melanie was saying, like it shifted and it changed over time. Did you have any things that really stuck with you, or really, again, when the train started to go off the tracks, what was it that brought you back on it, that kept you grounded and kept you into that work, but that reminder to come back over and over?
Yes. I mean, certainly asana was my doorway in. And that was exactly what I needed back in grad school, because I needed to redefine my relationship with my body. I needed to redefine my relationship with movement and exercise. And the yoga space was the place where I learned that I don't have to beat myself up all the time. I don't have to be in a self-destructive relationship with myself. Melanie mentioned the word compassion, that learning compassion toward my body was hugely pivotal in how I learned to relate to myself and the world, really. So certainly that asana was the primary focus in the beginning. And then as I evolved in my recovery as a woman, as a mother, and then eventually back in treatment in my 30s, coming out of that, finding the yoga therapy program where I studied, that's where I was introduced to the philosophies and meditation practice and mantra practice, learning about how yoga affects the nervous system. When we start to view your being through this idea of a nervous system, right? And now all of a sudden you have this kind of way of describing, like, okay, my body is responding to this traffic, right? I'm feeling anxiety, or okay, I can feel my heart racing now. My nervous system's telling me that I'm scared, right? Like, it was just a new way to start understanding my responses to life. And so just that perspective has opened up so much. I would say right now, self-study is number one. It's the constant. And what that has given me through learning the philosophies and creating practices around the philosophies, carrying them with me, is the shift between calling a diagnosis, a demon or a monster or the thing that we have to banish, to realizing that it holds a wealth of wisdom and that is filled with lessons and gifts. And so that shift in relating to, a diagnosis or, whatever it is, whatever you think your demon is, right? It's actually this beautiful opportunity to learn about yourself. So that's the lens through which I'm always using my yoga practice lately, and certainly when I'm holding space for others to do as a yoga therapist.
I love
I
that.
have a regular. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
No, you're good. I was just saying I love that.
Oh, good. And then in terms of like daily rituals, every morning I do a little journaling for the day, just kind of setting my mind on like gratitude, setting my intention for the day, listing my top 3 goals for the day, usually professionally, and then, listing like 3 self-care goals. I do a little reading. I try to read something inspiring just to nourish my intellect. And then I do usually a short meditation, and I try to do some asana at home or in a class 2 or 3 times a week. But it's funny, whereas, in my early days, asana, going to yoga meant 90 minutes. It had to be 90 minutes. There had to be a lot of vinyasas and it had to be hot.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to get up and do 20 minutes and there's my practice. Yeah. And that's completely great.
Totally. Yeah. Vinyasa equals hot, sweaty yoga class every single time.
I know. I used to be such a snob about that. I crack up when I think back, how we can evolve in our practices. And like Melanie said, the practice is the pause, it's the breath, it's It's all of that all the time.
Well, and and to agree with both of you said, sometimes, the physical is there's a lot of great stuff that happens in the physical, like in any relationship, whether it's toxic or not, but there's a lot of really great things that happen from physical asana. There's a lot
Oh,
of
yeah,
tapas that happens there. There's a lot of growth and change and
absolutely.
shift. And there's, there's stira and sukha, the practice of that there that you can bring into the outside world. There's a beauty that happens in physical yoga. And the same, like I was kind of alluding to earlier, it's one of the tools to get us to be yoga. It's one of the things like meditation or pranayama or whatever it is to help us be in a yogic state.
That's right. I always say, we have to include our bodies in the process of healing our minds. They are not separate, and if we look back at, the purpose of asana is to prepare the body to sit, right? So we need our bodies in all of it.
Yeah. And the mind.
Yeah, exactly.
and y'all both have actually, I know that writing, or maybe I'm making this assumption, the writing has been a big part of your healing as well. You both have written some really cool things. Let's chat about those
Yeah,
things.
for me, one of the things is when I, began to see how my practice had begun to transform my relationship with my body, and I would say myself overall, and that became this wonderful gateway into empowerment and liberation. I just naturally felt compelled to want to offer that to as many people as possible. And really, the first kind of iteration of that is when my co-editor Anna Guest Jelly and I created the anthology Yoga and Body Image, where we wanted to, gather together really diverse stories from people with very diverse backgrounds on what that looked like and felt like for them, so that they would have the process of going through the cathartic experience of writing their story and then having more and more people share it. And of course, both she and I contributed our stories. And so that was one of the ways that we began to kind of combine those things. And, I've continued to do that in many ways. Yoga Rising came out, Embodied Resilience is coming out later next year. Jennifer has a chapter that is also going to be in that. And Jennifer and I have a retreat in New Zealand coming up. I'm sorry, why did I just say New Zealand? It's in Iceland.
Manifestation.
Totally. We're going to Iceland next March, and we're combining the writing and the yoga and the self-inquiry and the self-study based on a workshop that she and I taught here in Los Angeles earlier this year. So that has been part of our own process, but it's also been part of what we have done as individuals and as well as with our platforms to create space for others to do the same. And then bringing the experiential component of how can we guide you right deeper into that. So the writing has come up all over the place in different ways. And it's, like I said, it's one of the most exciting pieces for me because we can really move beyond the intellect, the rationality, the reason, the oftentimes tendency for people to look at what separates us or makes us different and just really come together heart to heart and see how much we have in common, as well as learn about people that maybe we don't normally have in our field. And I think there's something beautiful about having the personal transformation through the writing, but then offering something to the collective as well.
I love that. Yeah. I'm a big fan of journaling, but for me personally, and even on my retreats and whatnot, I do the same thing, because I think getting what's upstairs outside is really, really, really good. Taking it out for a walk is really nice and refreshing.
Definitely. Yeah. Giving voice, giving voice to your story. It's so validating.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, when another thing that happens is when you get it out is you start to realize like, oh, which part is just a story versus what's actually happening right now and where I'm at. It's another, again, another way of being able to analyze and to see what's going on.
It's so wonderful on so many levels. And it keeps you from, I think, oftentimes squirming away from things, right? Or, you kind of like you're really faced with some of the beauty and the magic of the light and the dark of what makes us who we are. And I think it's such a wonderful process that sometimes people take for granted, and in fact, to be quite honest, it's part of the reason that for both Yoga Rising and Yoga and Body Image, I had one of the contributors create discussion guides. And those are actually up on the book's websites and are free downloadable files, which is really meant to offer a support that as people read the books, they can have prompts to kind of go into those stories, but also really examine themselves and see how those themes and those topics and those experiences either relate or don't relate to their experiences, and expand their own frame of reference for their own experience, as well as how they look at these issues and topics as a whole.
Very cool. I love that. That's such a great way to support the reading. And also, but in addition to that, more community around that as well.
Absolutely. Because one of the other things that people are encouraged to do is we've had people all around the world who are part of the coalition or have been reading the books. They've taken those discussion guides, and not only have they used it in their own journey and inquiry, but they've also used it to many times create groups where they come together in community, like you said, and they kind of go through that as a collective. And there's really wonderful guidelines also about how do you create a community event? How do you hold space? How do you make this, a safe space? So yeah, that was exactly the point. For me, it's always about the personal transformation for the greater good or for the collective liberation. Let's do both at the same time.
Amen. Yeah, more of that on repeat.
Yeah, and nobody can say it better than Melanie Klein. Let's just be honest about that.
Thank you.
I mean, I will echo both of your guys' messages is just so beautiful, and it's such a. There are many different ways where yoga can save us, and whether it's any type of thing, it's just such a great way. And what y'all have done with it is just so. I mean, it's moving and it's impactful, and I love that you are. Again, I just keep going back to the same thing. I don't know how else to express it. I love that we get to share these voices. I love that we not only get to post the stories, but we get to hear them. And that makes it a little more okay for the rest of us that aren't ready to say it out loud yet, or don't have, the opportunity to say it out loud. It just gives us a little more connection into that source.
Absolutely. That feels like a mic drop for me. That's like a mic drop statement. It was really great. Agreed. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Exclamation point times 100.
Well, I can't thank y'all enough for coming on the show and, being brave and sharing your stories, but also being even braver and guiding others through their stories and helping them, connect to what is right now and what is, source. And I just can't thank you both enough for breaking in that we had the first 3 people on the show.
I think we did pretty good given that we're all in different cities.
Yeah, we're doing
exactly different time zones.
We're doing great.
We are doing great. Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time and giving us the platform to share this. I mean, Jennifer and I are so excited about what we're doing individually, as they're so complementary, obviously, but also what she and I are co-creating together. And we just invite folks to reach out to both Jennifer at Yoga for Eating Disorders, as well as myself, either on my personal website, which will provide, or the Yoga and Body Image Coalition. There are endless ways that we can offer resources and support and connections that, will, I think, really help anyone who's finding different access points to this work or just their own personal journey.
And we'll make sure that we leave all that in the show notes. As always, people can go and find y'all. And that's what we're here for. Get the voice out there, create the platform so that people can get the voice out there. That is the whole point.
Boom. Exactly.
I love it. Well, until the next Yogi Misfit session, this is Danni, Jennifer, and Melanie. That's 3. 1, 2, 3 people saying peace out.